Much like its literary source material, The Witcher game strikes a particularly deep chord with people from post-communist Eastern and Central Europe. Now this is ours. This is relatable. The much-touted Slavic fantasy label is far from the only reason. For one, not everyone in post-communist Europe is Slavic, yet The Witcher resonates with them all the same. Second, while the game has Slavic flavor by the bucket load, arguably more than the books thanks to landscape visuals, in the world of The Witcher this is but a drop in the ocean. After all, the stories directly reference Arthurian legend, Germanic folklore, French romanticism, Norse mythology, and fairy tale imports from the east and south. Cuties like Strigas, Vodyaноis, Kikimors even get somewhat lost in the shuffle. But how could it be otherwise? Creating an entire world based solely on Slavic mythology is incredibly difficult. The Slavs themselves didn't record their pre-Christian beliefs, and the new religion had no reason to help its competitors. Sources did remain, but no one compiled literary corpora like the Norse Eddas. Most knowledge of that era's faith was preserved only through oral tradition, customs, and superstitions that even deliberate Christian assimilation couldn't eradicate. This is a fragmented piece of culture that survived thanks to sheer stubbornness. And while Slavic heritage extends far beyond post-communist Europe, it is precisely because of this resilience Poland is one of the few countries The Witcher could emerge from. Looking far back, hardly any state is innocent, all have wanted to expand their borders at some point. Nevertheless, the Central Eastern European region in question is quite specific in that imperialist forces from the east, south and west were frequently casting their gaze upon it. The Ottomans, Russians, Austrians, among others. The peoples here have grown accustomed to piecing together their national and cultural identities after someone tried smashing them to smithereens. I myself am from Moldova. Centuries ago, the country's territory was part of the larger Principality of Moldavia until it fell under Ottoman suzerainty, which then ceded these lands to the Russians after falling out. Of course, nobody cared for the locals' opinion. Every country in the region has similar history textbook entries, including The Witcher's homeland, and I didn't use the term post-communist Europe for nothing. Former Eastern Bloc membership is the freshest trauma uniting the people of these lands. It's not for me to judge political systems on a theoretical level. But in practice, 20th century European communism was the same imperialist takeover, just with impeccable marketing that made some common folk believe in the idea. Until the 90s, when it became clear the regime had taken a massive, juicy, liquid shit everywhere, so it was time to end that wretchedness. Still, a huge mess remained. Destroyed cultural heritage, like historical architecture replaced with identical dreary concrete blocks. Forced mixing of peoples led to ethnic resentment, and not everyone knew what to do with their regained or lost nationality. The path toward a liberal future was thorny, the economy went to shit, corrupt opportunists exploited the poor, crime flourished, and the local elite was nothing more than kitchen intelligentsia, happy to philosophize, but not to act. Meanwhile, old propaganda resurfaced, those same imperialist forces throwing wrenches in the works, now using smarter, subtler tactics. I'm not saying The Witcher saga is an allegory for the era of its release, such simplification is unnecessary, but it's foolish to deny how this historical and social environment shaped people's mentality. A mentality where your private world matters more than a grand idea because the idea doesn't care about you, where you resort to connections rather than public institutions, where you hide cash in your socks drawer rather than in a bank in case of a systemic collapse, and where, amid destabilization, you resort to the most effective defense mechanism, harsh black humor. This mentality gleams through the art created in the region. The Witcher books aren't just dark fantasy with a dash of Slavic myth. They are soaked in this Central Eastern post-communist mindset. Fractured kingdoms under an imperialist shadow, distrust of institutions of power, useless bureaucracy, radicalized grievances, racial violence. The response? Cynicism, irony, sarcasm, but also hope. The world isn't devoid of people who can repeatedly claim they don't care, though in fact they do. Their actions determine a better future, if not for the world, then for their family. They'll whine and grumble but won't look away. Naturally, certain parallels will only be visible to Poles. And obviously, to love The Witcher, to engage with these stories of disenfranchised characters navigating a battered yet standing continent to build something beautiful, you don't need to be Polish or post-communist. But for those who are, this world and atmosphere reminds of their surroundings. They feel not merely interesting, but like home, a shabby picturesqueness in the realm of contrasts. I have this composite childhood memory, the Central City Park. Beautiful towering trees surrounding paths of crumbling, unmaintained asphalt. Yet on both sides stand freshly painted benches, life teeming around them. Families stroll, couples have picnics, children run wild on a playground. Its equipment made of iron so rusty feels they could get tetanus just from a touch. Nearby lies an unconscious drunk with a sign reading "Don't worry, I'm not dead," while some teenagers try to inconspicuously have glue in the bushes. At night, you shouldn't venture in, you might get killed. Inside the park, lamps are placed purely for show, the lights always stay off to conserve electricity. Yet right nearby, folk music blares from a restaurant hosting a wedding until dawn. This is essentially The Witcher, not a dark shit world where only suffering exists, making you marvel that anyone continues their bloodline. Rather, vivid life bursting from a problematic socio-economic foundation. A very problematic one, yet normalized because this is what everyday existence is like. The game's greatest strength is conveying this atmosphere. In the English version, more so in the Enhanced Edition released later as a free patch, it updates the translation, preserving not just the original text's meaning, but the crucial atmospheric flavor.
Why do locals persecute non-humans?
Humans have always hated dwarves and elves.
I don't understand.
Then go see that bastard Brog. I won't discuss it with strangers.
Why do the locals persecute non-humans?
Why do pricks go in cunts? It's the natural order of things. Humans have always hated dwarves and elves. Not for me to know why.
I'm not sure I understand.
Then ponder it on your own, or discuss it with that maggot Brog. I don't talk to strangers about these things.
Especially crucial for those unfamiliar with the saga, who are actually the game's primary audience, despite it being an unofficial continuation of the books. Not only because it resurrects the protagonist, Geralt, from presumed death, conveniently giving him amnesia so he can discover the world alongside players, starting with his profession. The prologue snappily explains witchers are mutants created to hunt monsters. But also because, truth be told, the game works far better as an introduction than a sequel. With knowledge of the source material, the joy of seeing familiar characters and locations quickly gives way to questions. Why doesn't a single acquaintance, even best friend Dandelion, breathe a word about Yennefer or Ciri, the most important people in Geralt's life who vanished on the same day 5 years ago? And why can a random innkeeper tell Geralt Ciri's full life and even name her, but not the Witcher and Sorceress from the same story? And yet, why then is the game so insistent on inserting a pseudo-Yennefer by giving an existing character, Triss, uncharacteristic traits, turning her into Trisifer, and for some reason dressing her like a stripper? Why is there a pseudo-Ciri in the boy Alvin sharing her abilities? And why are so many plot devices, twists, and even entire lines directly lifted from the books, often in unfitting places? Yes, Geralt's reflections on the changed nature of evil are wonderful, but in the books he was processing what he had been through in the saga. In the game, it's just a randomly available secondary dialogue.
The evil that witchers fight stems from chaos, from actions aimed at disturbing order. For where evil spreads, order cannot be established. Instead of the light of wisdom, the glimmer of hope, and the glow of warmth, darkness ensues. And in darkness you find nothing but blood, fangs, and claws. Like in the outskirts.
Nicely put, but as young Cero said to King Verdank on their first date, does it have any practical uses?
The right of witchers to live and function in this world has fallen out of balance, because the struggle between good and evil now plays out on a different battlefield with different rules. Evil has ceased being chaotic, No longer a blind elemental power, evil follows rules according to the rights it's been granted. It functions in line with treaties.
But if you have nothing to compare it to, all this won't raise questions. It's still strange in a broader context, as if the game lacks self-confidence, imitating the source to feel more Witcher-like. But to what end? The primary audience won't exclaim with joy, "Oh, this is from the book," at every reference, yet this extensive borrowing places The Witcher in a weird position for fans, both a continuation and a pseudo-reboot. On the other hand, the game isn't made of references alone, for alongside these insecurities stand boundless ambitions. Not structurally, for example, there is no open world per se, everything is divided into small, distinct zones. That's because in terms of framing, The Witcher is inspired by the early short story collections. There is an overarching plot hunting a criminal group that attacked the Witchers for their mutagenic secrets, but each chapter focuses on its own mini-arc examining socio-political themes, populism, scapegoating, segregations, bourgeois apathy, political games, and more. This is why the game is so good for newcomers. It's swiftly maneuvering through the world's conundrums in a structured, easy-to-grasp way. There's also the Scoia'tael versus the Order of the Flaming Rose thread, who often face decisions whether to help non-humans fighting for freedom via arguably terrorist acts, or religious fascist fanatics among whom are nonetheless noble friends, or stay out of it. This conflict is foundational to the game's main choices. But wait, remember Alvin? The game includes a guardianship storyline over this special child, connected to two mutually exclusive romances, Triss or the medic Shani, and to the late arriving main antagonist, touching on themes of upbringing, morality, and destiny. And that's not all! Many side quests develop into entire additional storylines, gradually forming their own small threads that occasionally intersect with the main ones. Absolutely everything mentioned has branching points with consequences that manifest later when you can't quickly change decisions with reloading. They don't fundamentally change the main plot, but do influence important details, characters' fates, and partially Geralt's portrayal. Though he has amnesia, his personality of a cold-on-the-outside cynic with a strong inner moral core remains unchanged, so in most cases we can't act out of character. All of this is wrapped in gameplay immersing into the role of a Witcher. Generally, to hunt monsters we go out at the right time of day and use the proper combat style and magical signs. But preparation is key. Choosing the right blade, steel or silver, preparing appropriate potions and oils, meaning we must gather ingredients. But amnesiac Geralt can't do this without reading books or talking to locals. For a few coins they share stories, populating the bestiary with entries. After all, investigation and deduction are a crucial part of a Witcher's work. Oftentimes dialogue leads to far more measured decisions and better outcomes than a sword. Oh, what opposite emotions players and non-players must be feeling now. The uninitiated are probably wondering how they ignored the game all this time. Samey models and wooden animations can be forgiven with all this. But those who've played know that next comes the but. Here it is. But. While The Witcher is hardly a failure, and its ambition is commendable, basically everything I've listed is executed clumsily at best. Combat, alchemy, quests, bosses, leveling, the script, dialogues, choices, there's nothing I'd call unconditionally good. I could easily spend hours dissecting every problem in excruciating detail. The monotony of combat, rhythmic mouse clicking, embodying and dance of death eventually wears thin. The uselessness of 3 out of 5 signs. At most potions and oils, even on hard difficulty. A leveling system that's overcomplicated yet shallow, mostly just percentage stat boosts. Lousy quest pacing, even when planning efficient routes, 80% of the time is spent wandering back and forth, so much that by the end it's natural to just ignore all monsters on the way. Bugs, dozens, hundreds of them even in the latest version, and blatant oversights. Should a father know his 2 daughters died? The game thinks no, letting him crack jokes in ignorance, even though one daughter is getting married and he doesn't even ask how she is. Although, you know what? That's typical dad behavior. Forget it, this part is true to life. True to life. Jokes aside, that description fits The Witcher. There is a quest where we help a courtesan cure her lover's lycanthropy. A sweet premise, even Geralt drops his pessimism if successful. But the quest isn't very good. We just run back and forth delivering potential remedies. Then we pin our hopes on the power of love. How? We simply ask her man what he wants from the relationship. Love prevails, but off screen with zero dramatic staging. But life isn't theater. In life, a beloved doesn't run to a werewolf about to kill a criminal at midnight, begging him to remember his humanity and whether he is sure he wouldn't hurt her. Then, under the full moon, he turns human because he loves her, while we conveniently watch. How epic that would have been, at least dramatically superior for sure. But in life, and in this game, it doesn't happen that way. We aren't around for such moments. All we can do is ask, after playing Courier, so did it work? It turns out yes. Well, there you go, that's it. A terribly boring quest, but true to life. So the question arises, to be a good game, must it be well made, or is it more important to be interesting? These qualities don't always coexist. The Witcher is interesting, but oddly mostly thanks to its rough edges, which would likely disappear with polishing. A polished game wouldn't send quest NPCs wandering the streets, forcing us to hunt them down. It wouldn't severely limit what merchants buy, making inventory management a market-wide chore. It would make dark caves slightly more visible, so the cat potion added comfort rather than being mandatory against pitch blackness. A polished game would be different. It wouldn't be held together solely by obvious love for the source material acting as duct tape, alongside stunning music thanks to which the atmosphere remains queen. Yes, we return to the atmosphere, the unmatched facade hiding a mess, like a quick cleanup before guests arrive. Clumsy dialogues. Most choice consequences are so insignificant that without Geralt's introspective cutscenes, they might have gone unnoticed. Cringe-worthy sex cards absurdly trying to land maturity. Often incomprehensible scene staging. Aspects inspired by the books, but so clunkily implemented they misrepresent them to non-readers. But all forgivable thanks to the atmosphere carefully building a bridge towards the game's ambitions. Chapter 1 is where it becomes clear whether you've fallen in love with The Witcher. We're dropped into a rural outskirts area. By day, idyllic splendor. By night, residents are terrorized by the Beast, a ghost dog summoning its smaller minions. What better work for a monster slayer? Except digging deeper raises a question. Who exactly is the monster here? Investigation reveals the Beast appeared as punishment for the local sins. The guardsman Mikul raped his girlfriend, driving her to suicide. The drunk Odo killed his brother in his sleep, and the local reverend traffics children. The game doesn't spell everything out directly. For example, at night, killer plants break through in Odo's garden. He asks us to destroy them. But by reading the right book or talking to a worldly old woman, we learn these echinopsis grow at sites of terrible crimes. Aha! Everything is clear and obvious. Except no. Sure, in The Witcher, monsters are symptoms of social ills. But here, it's unclear whether the Beast appeared on its own or was summoned by the local witch Abigail, despised by the villagers. She knows everyone's secrets. She sold poison to Ilsa. Her house contains a doll of Odo. Did he commit fratricide of his own free will? We will never know. Yet with incomplete information, we must choose. Hand Abigail to the mob to be torn apart, or protect her from these sinners. Is the choice equivalent? No, one side is clearly guiltier. But what matters is that no party is innocent, yet we must assist one.
Since the beginning of time, woman has been the nest of all evil, the tool of chaos, party to the conspiracy against the world and the human race. Woman is ruled solely by corporal lust. To satisfy her insatiable hunger and unnatural desires, she gladly serves demons.
They intend to kill us.
Don't be afraid.
There she is! Burn the foul witch!
No one is burning anyone.
Friends, they wish to scare us. Fear not! They're helpless as long as we stand together!
Is that so?
Begone, Witcher, and leave the witch, or we'll burn you too.
I'd like to see you try, pleb.
Ah!
Shove off, and maybe I'll let you be. You have two options. Wait until I leave and then murder Abigail, but then I'll come back. I'll slay every lice-ridden peasant, anything that moves and can't climb a tree. Or you can try to lead honorable lives, clear your conscience, start again, like humans. The choice is yours.
Thank you, Geralt.
Let's go. We need to deal with the beast.
If everything clicks for you at this Chapter 1 finale, the rest of the game will too. The Chapter 2 detective story with multiple suspects where you can genuinely err, because conclusions depend on asking the right questions, reading the right books, and exploring forbidden places. The reimagined Polish drama Baladina in Chapter 4, where the aforementioned wedding is disrupted by sororicide. The dilemma of choosing between helping the persecuted or helping a friend alongside other difficult choices. The dry, ironic humor in dialogues.
Then bold Foltest uttered these words. Virtuous Radovid.
What the hell is that?
I'm trying to keep a faithful and accurate record of these events.
He said, "Stop deliberating, son. We need to put out the fire in this whorehouse."
Geralt, you have no sense of poetry.
Yes, in the detective segment, Geralt sometimes inexplicably arrives at conclusions, and with a certain sequence of actions he solves the whole mystery in a way that's incomprehensible. Yes, the Polish story seems to have been borrowed more for flavor than to examine themes under a magnifying glass, unlike the book's use of folklore. Yes, it's sometimes unclear why certain lines lead to specific outcomes feel enforced, and generally, far from all dialogues are pure gold. Ultimately, none of this ties into a proper knot. An insanely atmospheric conversation where three friends drink and discuss everyday affairs exists alongside a friendship that manifests sporadically at best. The game effectively introduces two main antagonists early, but over dozens of hours, neither develops into a complex character. Not to mention a sudden late-game introduction of the actual ultimate antagonist, while there's one hell of a plot twist revealed before the ending that respects our intelligence and lets us draw our own conclusions. His connection to the saga's prophecy, his motivation, personality, again, underdeveloped. The most telling example of the game's duality is the Striga story, the iconic short tale where Geralt breaks a princess's curse by spending a night with her, so to speak. The game's intro cinematic epically adapts this battle almost word for word, showing how Geralt prevents the Striga's return to the sarcophagus until morning to turn her human. It's such a classic that I don't even mind the game repeating the plot by recursing the princess. But the actual gameplay of this battle, this drawn-out survival until morning, well, it's less a desperate attempt to last until sunrise, and more a Benny Hill-style chase. Not a very interesting one at that. The Witcher is inseparable from this duality. There is so much to dislike or tolerate, but also so much to love and adore, that returning to the question whether a good game must be polished or captivating, all I can say is, The Witcher is a good game. But then again, what other answer would you expect from a Moldovan? Besides, The Witcher is so contrasty, you might disagree. Wonderful ideas, clumsy execution, mature themes mixed with cringe, incredible ambitions, falling short. Not just its world, but the game itself is half-destroyed asphalt amid beautiful trees. Not everyone will find it interesting or enjoy walking through it, but some will be intrigued by the unusualness, and for others, it's downright like home.